Well, liberal politicians like to demonize firearms. It's certainly easier than blaming criminals for the crime. It's sort of like how I prefer to blame my fork rather than myself for being fat. But at the end of the day, it was me who did it. In Canada, we pretty much banned everything once, twice, three times. But the United States still persists in its Second Amendment. And in fact, the greatest ads for firearm ownership have not come from the gun lobby, but rather from the Antifa-style riots across America these last months that have terrified Americans, especially with the Democrat cry to defund police. If the police won't be there, maybe you have to be there for yourself. Gun sales have hit new records. Well, there's a new book out that provides the intellectual basis for this natural American reaction to arm themselves. The book is by our friend, Dr. John Lott. It's called Gun Control Myths. And the author himself joins us now via Skype from Missoula, Montana. Well, Dr. Lott, it's a pleasure to see you again. It's been too long. Welcome back to the show. Tell us about your new book, Gun Control Myths.
No, it's great to talk to you, Ezra. Well, I mean, I think this election is the most important election that we have in terms of determining whether people are going to be able to go and own guns in the future in the United States. There's really a lot at stake here. And I wrote the book because there are a lot of claims that we frequently see in the media that are being made these days that I wanted to go and respond to. So there are 36 different myths that I go through in the book. Claims that the United States has more mass public shootings than other countries. It's just one of the things that are there. How people should respond when they're confronted by a criminal, whether gun ownership in the home leads to more suicides. There are lots of different types of issues that we go through in the book. But if I could just say before I get into the book stuff, just your comments, because I think they're right on at the beginning there. I think, anybody who's read my academic work knows I think police are extremely important in stopping crime. I think they're the single most important factor. But the police themselves have always understood that they virtually always arrive on the crime scene after the crimes occurred. And that raises the question what people should do when they're having to confront a criminal by themselves. And that's in normal times. But now we're in a situation, as you say, where we have calls for defunding the police. We have orders for police to stand down during the riots. I mean, if people want to go and see what it's going to be like having defunded police departments, just go and see what happens when you have the police stand down. We have jails across the country in Los Angeles and San Francisco and Chicago that have released up to half the inmates that they had in the jails there. It's kind of a perfect storm for having increased crime. And as you say, we've had record increases in gun sales because people have begun to realize even more than before that they're ultimately going to have to be the ones who are responsible for protecting themselves when the police can't be there.
I think that so far in Canada, we have not been faced with massive police defunding efforts. There have been some attempts to have votes along those lines, including here in Toronto, Canada's largest city, but so far they've failed. I don't think we have the same mania. And I don't think we have the same political funding behind it like the anti-gun groups do in the States. But there are still many gun myths in Canada. You mentioned one of them about mass shootings. Canada recently had our largest mass shooting ever in the Atlantic provinces, where someone strangely with a mock police car and a mock police uniform just went on a shooting spree. The RCMP have been extremely closed-mouthed about what went on there. There's been theories that he was a police informant or other strange things. But that whole thing went away fairly quickly in the media, because I think that the Canadian media, they love the narrative of massive shootings in the States. They cover those exhaustively, but massive shootings in Canada, well, that contradicts our one of our righteous delusions, which is that we are immune to gun crimes up here. I think that Democrats in the States and liberals in Canada only focus on certain shootings that support their own political narrative. What do you think?
I think you're right. And I think part of it, which fits in with what you're saying, is I'm not even sure we ever knew what gun that the guy used to begin with, at least not in the initial news reports that I saw over the first weeks afterwards. And I suspect that the gun that was used didn't fit the narrative that was used there. I mean, the person, in any case, wasn't legally licensed to go and own the guns that he had. So, if he's already breaking the law by having that, I know there was some initial attempt to go and blame the United States or something for him having the guns that were there. But, plus he ended up killing a police officer and taking the guns that the officer had. It's not really clear what you would do to prevent that. I mean, I guess he had rammed his car into the other police vehicle that was there. So, there are lots of things that kind of didn't fit the normal narrative. But, you look around the world, and the United States makes up about 1% of the mass public shooters, which is way below our share of the world population, which is almost 5%. There are many countries in Europe. France, for example, has a fatality rate from mass public shootings that's about 111% higher than the rate in the U.S. Russia has a rate that's about 50% higher. You have other countries, major countries like Norway and Switzerland and Finland, which have rates that are at least 25% higher than the rate in the United States, and many smaller European countries, which are much higher. But they just don't get much news coverage. I mean, obviously, when you had like the Paris shooting in November 2015 for the concert hall, there were 130 people were killed. That gets news coverage. But I just give you an example. So everybody knows about the mosque shooting in New Zealand last year. But a few people would know that within less than 24 hours of that, there was a big school shooting in Brazil, or there was a mass public shooting in the Netherlands. I can understand to a large extent why American cases get more news coverage in America than cases in the rest of the world, but it still creates kind of a misperception in people's minds of the rates that these attacks are occurring in the United States versus other places, many of them like France, which has extremely strict gun control laws. They ban semi-automatic guns, for example. Russia only has about 1% of the adult population that is legally licensed to own a gun, and yet they have much higher rates. The other thing that happens with the media coverage, which really, I think, has a huge impact on the debate, is how they cover these cases or don't cover certain aspects of them. So, for example, relatively few people would know that 94% of the successful mass public shootings occur in places where guns are banned. These killers may be crazy in some sense, but they're not all stupid. They know if they go to a place where people are banned from having guns, where the victims aren't able to go and defend themselves, they're going to be more successful in killing more people. And that's going to make it so that they're going to be able to get more news coverage. My guess is if even once in a while the media would mention we've had yet another mass public shooting where guns were banned, we'd have a different debate. What the media does cover, things like how the person got the gun or what type of gun was used, the media is very frequently wrong in their initial news reports. The easiest thing for them to determine actually would be, did this attack occur in a gun-free zone or not? And the other thing is what they don't cover. So just over a week ago, there was a case in Indiana where a concealed handgun permit stopped what the police captain said she believed would have been many people killed if he hadn't been there. He was driving by in his car. His car was hit by one of the bullets. He got out and quickly stopped the attacker. One of the chapters in Gun Control Myths goes through dozens of cases which have happened in the last few years where concealed carry permit holders have stopped what otherwise would have been mass public shootings. And it's just amazing how little news coverage these things get. Of the 5 years that I look at there's really only 2 cases that got any national news coverage to speak of. And both of the cases, the media completely botched the story and got it backwards. There was one case in Louisville, Kentucky, that had occurred just a few days after the synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh, where an attacker went into a Kroger grocery store, started shooting blacks. And what got the attention of the New York Times and ABC, CBS, NBC, Meet the Press, whatever, was the quote from the murderer to a customer saying, "Whites don't shoot whites." And it was played as this murderer assuring this white customer that since they were both whites, he had nothing to worry about. What they missed was the first part of the quote. The first part of the quote was, "Please don't shoot me. Whites don't shoot whites." And that rather than the murderer assuring the customer that the customer had nothing to worry about, the murderer was begging the customer not to shoot him because the customer had a permanent concealed handgun that it was pointing at the murderer. And the murderer was begging the customer not to shoot him. At the time, I was still able to kind of text back and forth with Chuck Todd, who was moderator of Meet the Press, and which is a big Sunday morning talk show in the United States. And I texted him. I said, you just spent 5 minutes on this, which is a time. And I think you missed some stuff here. And here are some links to the local media in Kentucky, which carried the full quote, because it's kind of the opposite of what you said. Plus, the racial aspect, which was being pushed so much. Here you had a white customer who's being assured that he had nothing to worry about. He could have just let the situation go. Instead, he came to the aid of the black customers who were being killed there and stopped the attack. And so it could have also been played as not just a white killing blacks, but a white coming to the aid to stop the attack against blacks. But that didn't fit the narrative that was being pushed at the time.
Wow. So the media literally said the opposite meaning of what happened there. I want to ask you about one myth, because non-gun people love the word AR-15. It makes them feel like they know the jargon and they're really sophisticated. Ask an anti-gun person to define assault rifle and they don't know how. It looks scary, it's black. Like they don't know what is or isn't an assault rifle. They just know they're against them. And they sure know the word AR-15 because that's the evil gun. I don't think there's ever been a case in Canada of an AR-15 being used in a crime, in a murder, in a shooting, ever. And I can't find a case. I wonder if you know that statistic.
Not for Canada.
Or if you know its relative prevalence in uses of crimes in America, because I don't think it's ever been used in a crime in Canada, although boy, Justin Trudeau sure bans it. Sure. I don't think it's used often in crimes in the United States, but you would probably know.
Right. I don't know the numbers for Canada, but off the top of my head, but I can believe what you're saying. But in the United States, you have a little bit over 2% of the murders involve any type of rifle, of any type. AR-15s would be one type of rifle. The FBI numbers don't even break it down by type of rifle, because you're talking about, a pretty small number of cases that are there. And so they don't break it down by that. So, I can assume that, look, the thing is, as you say, it's people don't understand what type of guns are there. We're talking about a semi-automatic rifle that fires the same bullets with the same rapidity, doing the same damage as a small caliber hunting rifle. If you want to go and ban all semi-automatic guns, at least there might be some logic to it. But to go and ban certain semi-automatic guns based on how they look rather than how they function doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the reason why they're not trying to ban, or at least not many politicians, there are some who are in the United States now who are trying to ban all semi-automatic guns, is because the vast majority of guns owned in the United States are semi-automatics. There's three types of guns. There's fully automatic machine guns, or guns that at least have burst mode, which as you pull the trigger, you have multiple bullets come out. You have semi-automatic, which one pull the trigger, one bullet comes out, it reloads itself, one pull the trigger, one bullet comes out, and so on. And then you have manually loaded guns where you have to physically yourself put another bullet in the chamber after you fire the gun. The thing is, people who use guns defensively benefit from having semi-automatic guns. If you're being attacked by a criminal, you may not have the luxury of time to load your gun like that. If you have to fire more than one shot, you may not have the luxury of time to go and reload your gun like that. And so, I think, if we want to ban semi-automatic guns, and we're not talking about any of these murders involving machine guns. I mean, one of the real misimpressions that the media gets, we put out a video a little while ago on how popular television shows cover guns. And if you watch Chicago PD or Hawaii 5-0 or most of these other cop shows, The Rookie or whatever, you're going to think almost all the criminals have machine guns. And I suppose it makes the shows more dramatic. But since the 1930s, there's been 2 murders in the United States involving machine guns. But yet, if you go and watch Chicago PD, you're going to think, 95% of all the murders that occur there involve machine guns. And they talk about AR-15s, and then they show a machine gun being fired. And it's really, really creates a lot of misimpressions. So I'm not surprised that people have the misimpressions that you're talking about.
Gun control, I use the phrase security theater when we go to the airport. I don't think the TSA has ever caught a terrorist, but we're supposed to feel better. We have public health theater now. We're wearing masks, but I don't think they work. I think it's just to keep people in a certain psychological state of mind. I think we have gun control theater more than we have gun control. I don't know how many times the mayor of Chicago is going to re-ban the same guns, or why she thinks it will work the 10th time where it didn't work the 9 previous times. I think so much of gun control theater is a psychological salve to liberals to make themselves feel better. I don't think it's actually designed to make a difference in crime. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's to shift the blame to somebody else. So for example, you mentioned Chicago. In 2018, the arrest rate for murder in Chicago was 13%. That means out of every 100 murders in Chicago, they arrested 13 people, and for those murders, and that's on average. The rate for arresting gang murders is even lower, and not all those are convicted. And so you're talking about single-digit percent-wise cases in murders in Chicago that result in the conviction where somebody goes to jail. Now that's it's not rocket science. If you make it so that criminals don't have much to worry about, that they're not going to get punished for going and committing a murder, then you're going to see a lot more murders that are going to occur. And it's very easy to understand why you have so many murders in Chicago or some of these other cities. And that is, because of the political correctness of politicians over time. I can give you one example. Rahm Emanuel, when he was mayor, made an agreement with the ACLU that every time a police officer talks to a civilian, they have to fill out 2 legal-sized pages of fine print forms, which take about an hour for them to fill out, where they have to go and say who they talk to, why they talk to them, where they talk, describe in detail, characteristics of the person they talk to. And so if you're a police officer and you talk to, let's say, 4 people in the morning, your entire afternoon is taken up filling out paperwork. And that has a couple effects. One, it discourages officers from talking to people in the area that they're policing. And two, it takes police officers off the street. I mean, you're talking at the beginning about defunding police. Well, in some sense, this accomplishes the same thing. I mean, you're still paying them, and you still have them on the payroll. But the effective number of hours that a police officer is out there has been greatly reduced. And so it's not too surprising. And that's just one of many things that happens in many of these Democratic-controlled cities. And here's the sad thing, and that is the very people that Democrats claim that they care about, poor blacks, are the ones who get harmed the most by this. When you go and you have police stand down, where do they think the riots are occurring? They're occurring in heavily black areas. Some of those businesses are owned by blacks. The people who mainly work in those businesses are blacks. The people who shop in those stores are overwhelmingly black. Where are they supposed to have jobs afterwards? What happens to their jobs? What happens to where they can go and shop? And the business owners who've had their businesses destroyed, even if they want to try to open up again, what do you think the insurance premiums are? If you want to go and see the impact of something like this, go look at Detroit. Back in the 1950s and the first part of the 1960s, Detroit was the wealthiest by far large city in the United States. You go there now, you still have fields where there used to be businesses and buildings that were destroyed that have never been replaced.
It's very sad, very sad. Well, listen, I'm very glad you're writing this book, and it couldn't be more timely. The book is called Gun Control Myths. We're talking with Dr. John Lott, who joins us via Skype from Montana. Dr. Lott, I look forward to seeing how your book does, how it's received. I know that you have done interviews in the past with many national media, and in fact, you just mentioned a text exchange you had a little while back with a prominent national journalist. Can I ask you, is your point of view even allowed into legacy media? Have you received any interviews, or are you in some ways being deplatformed?
Right. Well, it's gotten a lot harder over the last 10 years or 5 years in particular. There are a couple things that have happened. One, the gun control groups have an agreement among themselves not to debate me. And that includes not just on TV and radio, but even in university settings. And when you're talking about TV, they want to make sure that they have people on the other side of the debate, at least if they're going to have me on. And I've had a number of occasions where I've been asked to be on CNN or what have you, and I'll go be driving into the studio and I'll get a call from the booker saying, well, she's sorry, but she just talked to, Michael Bloomberg's Everytown, and they won't debate me. And if there's time, she may ask me, well, is there somebody else who has similar views that I could suggest? But often they'll just let them on by themselves then at that point and not have somebody on the other side. But we've, last year, twice I had Twitter lock my accounts that we had, both my personal account and the Crime Prevention Research Center account, because we had tweeted on the New Zealand shooter, basically telling people that this guy called himself a socialist, that he was extreme environmentalist who hated minorities because he thought they had too many kids and that it was going to damage the environment. I just was tweeting the truth out there. And there are other things like Google has shadow banned our website, our crimeresearch.org website, right after the 2016 election. In January, there was a sudden 90% drop in the traffic that we had to the website. So, there are lots of things that are going on, but we keep pushing on.
That's incredible. Well, listen, it's great to have you on our show. We certainly will never shadow ban you or deplatform you. Keep up the fight down there. I look forward to reading the book.
Well, thanks. I think it's one of my best books, and I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. That's our friend, Dr. John Lott. That's an excerpt from my daily show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.